Charizard, Pidgeot, Raichu, Alakazam, Lapras, Dragonite. That was, I think, the team that helped me defeat the Elite Four and my rival in Pokémon Red on the Game Boy in 1999. I can't check. I still have the Game Boy, but that original cartridge was sold several years ago in one of several misdirected approaches to appear grown up. I got my £25, but I didn't suddenly become more emotionally mature, nor gain the ability to pay my bills on time. I don't think I wiped my save. So I like to think that Dragonite, my pride and joy, is still out there somewhere. I sometimes wonder what he's up to. So, it's 1999. Every other Saturday or so, you can likely find me in the passenger seat of my granddad's car. We're making our way, more or less fortnightly, to see our football team. We leave around lunchtime, an hour's drive. During that time, my granddad tells me stories about his childhood and his early adult life. As a child, during the Second World War, he was evacuated to Wales. In his early adult life, he was a builder. He can point at houses along the way that he helped to build. A long and fascinating life, full of stories of a world so different that it's hard to comprehend now. I'm barely listening, as I'm the model of an introverted, screen-obsessed only child. I'm busy exploring somewhere called Kanto, on a purple Game Boy Color, grinding out XP to level up my Diglett. Just another regret. We park a 15-minute walk from the ground. Then, on foot, we join up with an ever-increasing crowd, all shirts and scarves. It's usually cold. Half-time, hot chocolate. After watching our team lose, we take that 15-minute walk again, absorbing the post-match dialogue around us. They were terrible, they were brilliant. They're doomed, they deserve more. Back in the car, we listen to results from other grounds around the country on the radio. We pick up chips on the way home, for us, and for the rest of the family. In the glow of the post-match deconstruction, I usually slink away, back to that grind, and back to working on that team. I think about football and Pokémon together because, for me, they are almost one and the same. Football hit me at almost the right time. The shirts, the stickers, the colour in the community, the superhuman superstars looking back from the playing cards, that car ride, and that walk. I love the game. I love all of the ephemeral kid stuff around it. But even then, the awareness of the broader world, the hooliganism, the laddishness, the expectation and demands of being a certain type of person, a certain type of fan, give me pause and keep me at arm's length. I can't commit to football in quite the way it wants.
Welcome, it's SMTV Live.
The kind of show that encourages this type of behaviour.
I wanna be the very best. This is the show with more hoots than a big mouth owl.
From this way.
To SMTV Live.
Pokémon Red, and the Pocket Monster craze as a whole, hit me at almost the right time. I love the anime. I found Brock and Team Rocket hilarious, and probably still do. It was a version of the cinematic Spielberg adventures I loved, reinvented for my sensibilities, that being video games, and the fantasy of winning, of being special. The anime debuted on UK TV several months before the game even released. Now that might seem strange, but I think it's still easy to conceive now how that approach only increased the excitement around the game, that everyone's introduction to this new world was through this hyper-colourful and stylised window. It was a great trick. It didn't matter that the game, when it arrived, was visually simplistic, monogram. It was just a means to an end, a way of engaging with the world, the adventure. when I rolled into Professor Oak's lab at the start of my adventure, it was the one that I watched on SMTV Live, not the one on that withered, lateral 2.3-inch screen. I say almost the right time, because, like football, it didn't feel like the absolute right time. I knew nothing about Japanese culture, or anime, other than the received wisdom that it was cool and exotic, the future of pop media, but with an extensive backstory that I had no hope of internalising. So, I just assumed that I was missing something. I assumed there was some knowledge I needed, some shared experience that I'd missed. Being a little too young and a lot too stupid to know that I could use this new internet thing to bridge those gaps, I just continued feeling lost. Flawed, short-sighted, entirely self-centered logic, but I'm not sure that I can articulate a reason any better than that. Pokémon always felt like it wasn't really made for me. It was the first time where I felt that the thing I loved, video games, had moved past me. That this new thing was for a new generation of gamers. That's a big part of why I played Red for all it was worth, and then that was it. I never played Yellow. Then Gold and Silver came too soon for me. The idea of starting over even more off-putting than the idea of being left behind. I checked out, never to return. I've not so much as touched a Pokemon game since. I'm not sure I've ever even seen one in motion in real life. Smash cut through 30 years of life. Pokémon Legends Z-A is the first Pokemon game in those 30 years that has captured my attention. Now, I'm not critiquing any entries between the then and the now. I know nothing about them, so I have no knowledge on which to make any judgments. If anything, my understanding that the series has changed and iterated and developed into a beloved franchise that can support solo and PvP gameplay that gives something to players of all ages tells me one thing. It's good, and I've been missing out. There's something there. There has to be. Also, that understanding tells me something else. That this series has never been further away from me, never more out of reach. I want to try again with Pokemon. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. It's fine either way. Because remaining curious and open-minded is more important than the finer print. These are noble intentions, but with reservations. I don't really know what I'm getting into, and it feels like going in so blind makes this all doomed to failure. So, I need some guidance. A real-life Professor Oak to give me some pointers at the outset of this new adventure. And if you follow games media, particularly Pokemon games media, there is only one name that comes to mind.
My name is Nathan Ellingsworth. I'm a professional journalist. I was previously senior Pokemon writer at Dexerto. I'm now a freelancer who can be seen at The Escapist, at Destructoid, at GameSpot, at Polygon, and I have been a Pokemon expert for much of this time. And you can also find me on the Secret Rare Pokemon podcast, and I write a weekly Pokemon-based newsletter called the Goldenrod Gazette, which covers all of the week's news.
Nathan Ellingsworth is a games journalist, writer, video editor, presenter, podcaster, and DJ who specialises in the world of Pokemon. He has covered the series in all its forms for a variety of outlets and across a wealth of platforms, and is the go-to guy for Pokemon coverage for a number of the most popular online publications, including Dexerto, Nintendo Life, and Pocket Tactics. I've followed his work across social media for a while, and his work ethic, knowledge, and obvious talent in this field makes him an obvious person to reach out to for help in returning to the world of Pokemon. He's a young guy who already has a storied career seemingly more in line with that of a 20-year veteran. I, selfishly, want to make use of his depth of knowledge, but I'm also genuinely interested in his career and his journey through games media, as I think it's a great example of how one can navigate that industry through the extended period of volatility that it's been undergoing for pretty much the entire time Nathan has been working in it. Now, we've got a lot to talk about, including Nathan's thoughts on that new game. So, let's get to it. Hi, I'm Andrew. Welcome to Dialogue Tree. This is episode 24. Super effective. Nathan Ellingsworth on Pokémon Legends Z-A and recapturing lapsed fans. Hi Nathan, thank you for coming on the show today. How are you? How has your week been?
I'm great, thank you. It's been a good week. It's quite busy, and currently my fiance is away on her hen do, so it's just me and the dog holding down the fort. Probably a fun weekend of gaming ahead, and also just kind of jealous of all of our friends being away with my partner and me not being there.
Yeah, that's I can see the downside there. Yeah, I guess congratulations are in order.
Thank you
for your impending wedding. Have you had your stag do? If you don't mind me asking.
No, that is in a couple of weeks, and my friends booked it all as a surprise, which is very lovely of them. But I will say they booked it for not long after the launch of Pokémon Legends Z-A, and I did kind of have to say to them, like, I'm being very grateful. This is wonderful, but professionally, you couldn't have picked a worse time.
I appreciate it, but at the same time, it's very inconsiderate of you.
It's all right. We're working around it, and it'll probably be a nice break.
Do you know what you're doing? You don't have to share that, or is it a complete surprise?
I've got no idea. Complete surprise.
Man. Well, best of luck to you.
Yeah.
I hope your friends are kind.
They are. They're good people. It'll be fine. I'm not going to end up tied to a lamppost somewhere.
Well, that is good. That is good news. So you have been kind enough to share your time today in your capacity as an expert on a particular game series. You mentioned it there. That is Pokemon. At the time of recording, we are just under a week away from the release of the next major game in the series. That is Pokémon Legends Z-A. And we're going to get to talking about that, as well as the series as a whole, because I'm someone who hasn't played a Pokemon game since Red on the Game Boy. So I partially see this conversation as being a means for you to use your powers to convince me, like a Pokemon semi-skeptic, that Z-A is a good point at which to come back to the series. But before we get to all that, I thought it would be nice to get to know a bit about you. Now, for those who don't know, you are a journalist, a writer, video producer, presenter, podcaster, and DJ, like with an absolute ton of experience in all of those fields. And I'm really interested in hearing a bit more about your journey through games media. So I followed you on like a few social platforms for a few years, and I've like seen you move through various outlets. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about your journey through games media. Now, I guess there's a lot to cover. So I guess first, like, how did you get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had an interesting sort of entry point. I've always been absolutely obsessed with video games. Anyone who knows me since childhood will attest to that. But I didn't think it was possible for it to be a job for the longest time. So I actually went to university to study media and film production. And coming out of university, I then started work on some TV shows and films in and around Bristol in the southwest. So I worked for a production company called Evolutions, who is a post-production house on like Countryfile and DIY SOS. I worked as a production runner for some companies, and just worked on various TV shows and stuff like that, all while also being a busy DJ as you are in Bristol, and kind of just gaming in my spare time, but still really loving it. And then essentially COVID happened, and I lost a lot of work absolutely immediately. And luckily for me, just prior to COVID, I had actually one of my many other jobs at the time was working as an events manager for a bar in Bristol, and a friend of mine was the guy who was running the place. And we had this crazy idea one time. We were like, why don't we do just like on a Sunday? Why don't we do like a video game like event? Let's do like a tournament or something. And we ended up doing a Wii Sports tournament in this pub in Bristol, and it was really wonderful. It was very fun, and I ended up meeting quite a few people there that were involved in the local space. And essentially, I ended up started writing for free for a blog called the Video Game Almanac. It was a really lovely guy called Ed who got me to do that. And then once COVID started, I just kept doing that for free, and then I started writing for Switch Player magazine. Then I started getting picked up for like freelance work for other places, and I was just it was a terrible, awful like time getting through COVID, but I was very lucky that I was furloughed and I could put a lot of time and a lot of effort into practicing writing. I covered so much stuff on like Animal Crossing at the time, and those sorts of games, and it allowed me to sort of at a time where I thought my professional career was like completely done, because all I wanted to do before this was work in film. and to just suddenly be like, oh, I can do this other thing, and I'm actually quite good at it. Like I've written my whole life in uni. I used to review albums. Actually, I used to review music as well as writing about TV and film as well for like various student websites and magazines and things. So yeah, writing was always something I loved to do, and then just suddenly I had this break and this chance, and it kind of all snowballed from after working at Switchplayer magazine. I got a job as a staff writer for Pocket Tactics, which is part of Network N. A really wonderful team, absolutely really lovely people. It's still headed up by Ruby, who's one of the best editors in the business, very quietly just doing an amazing job. And people sort of underestimate Pocket Tactics. And after a couple of years there, I was approached by Dexerto because of my extended work on Pokemon. Just everything I did was always like not Pokemon leaning perhaps, but like it definitely was a huge part of what I was writing about. So yeah, I think I'd done some interviews with some of the people involved in Pokemon Go. So Michael Steranka and Kim Adams, who both work for Niantic, and I think I'd done an interview with Joe Merrick and a couple of other people in the Pokemon community. And so because of this, Dexerto spotted me, reached out, and they were like, we need someone to head up our Pokemon section. So I became their senior Pokemon writer. I did that for a good year, which was wonderful stuff. I really loved the Dexerto team. Having to be in charge of a load of writers was quite ambitious, but it was a really good learning curve, and it allowed me to bring in as like a lot of my sort of people skills and management skills and stuff like that from various other jobs that I hadn't really thought I would get a chance to sort of stretch. So loved that role. And then about a year ago, myself and about, I'm going to say 30, 40, maybe a few more people from Dexerto were all made redundant in a series of redundancies over like a few months, which was mostly a reaction to the Google Core update, which, if people aren't aware, changed how websites were prioritized when you Google something, and it shattered a lot of ad revenue for lots of sites. So last year saw the fall of Dexerto is still going, and they still have a really good core team, but they struggled. GG Recon is one of the sites that unfortunately just had to like shutter. The Loadout and some other ones like all just sort of wiped out 1 year last year, like so many of these websites, or some of them got assimilated. So ever since then, basically just been running up in freelance and doing different bits and bobs. But it's been wonderful because I've got to write for many different websites, such as, who have I written for? I've written for Polygon, Destructoid, The Escapist, just started writing for GameSpot, and Nintendo Life. I do a lot of reviews and stuff for Nintendo Life, as well as I've hosted some events and done some presenting bits and bobs, and I've done lots of video editing. So it's been a very varied year, which I've really enjoyed, and a lot of that I've got to spend talking about Pokemon. And nowadays it's kind of nice that even a year later, like away from me having a full-time professional job, I'm basically at the point now where I'm seen as sort of a Pokemon expert, which is wonderful because I am slightly obsessed with it. So being paid to be that is wonderful. Yeah, it's a strange point in my career, but one I'm very happy to be in, and especially as we come towards a Pokemon launch day.
Yeah, you are a go-to guy for a lot of major outlets for like Pokemon expertise.
Yes.
I think that speaks volumes for the output that you have made over the last few years. You've basically been extremely busy for like 5 years solid.
Yep. Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah.
You mentioning there, you were thinking about the places that you've written for. Now, I was looking up earlier some places you have written for. Would you like to have a guess at how many articles are listed against you on Muckrack?
Ooh, I'd say a good 1,000 or so.
It's close. It's 1,807, which is astonishing. That is,
yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, a good few years, especially if you're doing a couple a day when you're working full time. I do less now, but yeah, working with Pocket Tactics or Dexerto is definitely like 2 or 3 a day.
Yeah, that speaks volumes for the volume of work that you have done. I'd love to have seen these Wii Sports parties at this bar. I can only imagine the level of chaos.
It was fun, yeah.
How many smashed TVs? how many smashed Wii remotes?
Oh my god, thankfully none, because I bought the CRT TVs and I was at the time living really near to this pub, but they had nowhere to store them. So every time we ended up doing one of these retro game nights, I could be spotted wandering through Bristol with a CRT TV under my arm. The fact that I didn't drop it, let alone anybody throw a Wiimote into it, is a miracle.
Thank you for that overview of your career. It's really interesting. Have there been any particular highlights from the past 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been really grateful to be invited to certain events or be included in certain marketing materials, and also some of the chats I've got with people have surprised me. Like I'm a huge Metroidvania fan, and I got to go to Spain to play Blasphemous 2 before launch. That was amazing. Going to Seville, where the creators are from, and being walked around the areas that they based some of the architecture of Blasphemous 2 on. They're showing us these amazing Gothic buildings and being like, this is where we grew up. This is the sort of buildings that informed that. That's one of the greatest things I've ever got to do. Being invited by Pokemon to events such as like the Pokemon Sleep preview, where we all got really relaxed and stayed in a hotel, and that was wonderful. It was me, Joe Merrick was there, Tom Phillips of IGN, but previously Eurogamer was there, as well as Tom Ryan Smith and lots of other journalists and wonderful content creators. We just had a very relaxing evening where they gave us loads of herbal teas, and we did the sort of like the bowl techniques, when they do like sound bowls. That was it.
Okay.
It was amazing. And I'll never forget that Ross, who's a Pokemon caster of P2CG Radio, he runs that YouTube channel. He's fantastic. He fell asleep in this room with the sound bowls,
as intended.
And he was just like, "Look, I've got kids. Leave me alone." And I think, other than that, I would say that getting to speak to Suda51, that was a wonderful interview. Cool. Speaking to the creative director of Spiritfarer is one of the best things I ever got to do. That was a wonderful insight. And also getting to review games like Super Mario Wonder and Bayonetta 3, which were huge games for me. Getting to play those before release, and every now and again, when you're a journalist, you sort of lose the splendor of that time when you first sign an NDA and you get something and it's all very naughty, and you're like, oh my god, don't tell anyone I've got this game. And after a while, it just becomes work. But I think especially with Super Mario Wonder, I felt the eye of Sauron on me in terms of Nintendo embargoes, and I going like trying to be so careful to play it because I had to travel a little bit. But getting to review that and play it pre-release was one of the most wonderful things, especially if you have that sort of thing. And then which one did I do? That was the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet Indigo Disc DLC. I played at the Pokemon offices in London, and I got to do that, and my preview was used for marketing materials for that. Like, getting to see your name next to like a Pokemon advert is like this impossibly wonderful thing that it's just when you have to try and explain it to yourself in a way that makes sense to your inner child, it sort of doesn't quite mesh, because there's always this version of yourself deep down who's going like, well, no, you're just this little 8-year-old boy who got told off for doing silly things. That there's no way that you'd actually be an adult who can do all this. So every now and again, it's nice to sort of sit and reconcile with those achievements and go, wow, yeah, I've actually done all right.
Yeah, that is so cool. It must be like so great to see something that you just started like for fun, like just for the love of it, like blown up on that scale. Like to actually be part of the thing that you love. That's great.
100%. Yeah.
So we have spoken about you as a Pokemon expert, and that brings us sort of more or less up to date on your career, where your current sort of regular gig is a newsletter called the Goldenrod Gazette. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, what is it, and what are your aims for it in the short and long term?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started the Goldenrod Gazette earlier this year, basically as I was freelancing and as I was sort of pushing to make myself more visible in the scene, because there's lots of freelancers out there, especially because of, as I mentioned, lots of websites who have unfortunately shuttered their doors. So lots of people that were working as full-time before are now currently working as freelance. So it's always good to do something regular and something that people sort of can see that you're putting effort into on top of that. And as well as that, I spent a lot of time when I was working at Dexerto having to sort of collate news, and we spent a lot of time either going through like Reddit stories to try and find interesting touchstones of like gameplay experience or stuff like that, or going through social media posts. And there would always inevitably be something I missed, which felt mad because it was my job to be in charge of Pokemon news. But it's, being the world's biggest multimedia franchise, there's always some sort of element, there's always some sort of arm, or there'll be a Pokemon Masters EX event or something which I slept on. And I think I got very good at keeping on top of these things, and because of that, whenever I speak to friends as well, and I try and talk to people who play the games, and I'll say like, oh, there's this mystery gift event this week, make sure you do that because then you get a free shiny, or there's this event or whatever. And it just became quite clear that like I could do this for so many people. And there's a lot of Pokemon fans who may miss out on this wealth of events just because there's just a lot going on, which is completely fair enough. Like even if you're tuned in, I play Pokemon Go, I play Pokemon TCG Pocket, I obviously play Scarlet and Violet and stuff like that. And every now and again I kick myself because I go, oh, I missed out on this. So that was a huge part of it, was basically making sure there was this like catch-all sort of weekly sort of blast of like, here's the events, don't worry. But also I spent a lot of time talking to Pokemon content creators and people in the space who either like have a different view from mine, or come from a sort of marginalized background, and just there's a lot of wonderful stories in the Pokemon community because it's so wide and so vast, and people interpret in different ways, and people love these characters and these Pokemon and stuff like that. So it was also an opportunity for me to hopefully pick up some of the more sort of interesting and heartfelt stories and just kind of amplify them, and give the some Pokemon fans who maybe wouldn't have spotted them a chance to see something about this franchise they love in a different way.
It's also a space that is just your own, where you're not like beholden to a website. You're not subject to like a website shuttering or the work coming in. It is a space that is just to showcase like your voice. I think it's a great newsletter. I'm a subscriber. I read it every week. It's basically the only way that I have sort of an overview of what's going on in this world that I have otherwise have no idea about. Yeah, a lot of it like it's just a different language to me. Like it's a good read. And,
thank you.
I encourage anyone interested to subscribe to it. So I think now is a good point to switching to talking about Pokemon. Now, the obvious starting point to me is, where did you get started with the series? What was your first game, or what was the game that made you a fan?
Well, I'm an OGer. I'm 36 years old. Which I luckily, because I'm one of the few games journalists in the UK to have a full head of hair. Not everyone thinks, but I actually got into it quite late, which I'm very grateful that I get to do this at all. So I don't care about being older; it's fine. I was on the playground when Pokemon Red and Blue came out, and obviously for us in the West, it was the anime first, and then we sort of had this rising tide of Pokemania because of the cards hitting the playground, and I was hooked from day one because I already had a Game Boy. I was very lucky in my household that my dad played games. We had like the Atari that had tapes in it, and then we had a Genesis and a SNES. So I was all aboard the video game train, and I had my Game Boy with Super Mario Land and Super Mario Land 2 and Tetris and Kirby and loads of other games I loved. So I was so primed and ready to be hit by the Pokemon wave. And at the time, Pokemon is an RPG, and that sometimes it feels like it's forgotten. But at that time, at that age for me especially, I'd never played anything like that. I'd only played platformers. I'd only played sort of, maybe a basketball game, but basically like Mario and Sonic, and that was about what I could deal with. And playing Pokemon at that age, like it's this sort of semi-open world game where you can go anywhere, you can do anything, and no two people have the same team or have the same moveset or or have probably done things the same way. It's this massively unique experience, and that is one of the reasons I always think it got such sort of a playground buzz to it, because as well as the genius of being able to trade between games, which was a phenomenal thing to even get your head around as a kid, because games have already been this insular thing, and then all of a sudden they're telling you plug a cable in and you can get your mates coughing or whatever like that. God, I just got swept up, and it was wonderful. I became obsessed with the cartoon, I became obsessed with the games, and I had red first, because everyone wanted red. Well, all the boys definitely wanted red because it was cool and Charizard. But as soon as I could, I got yellow. I went back and got blue, especially because I had a younger brother. So as we sort of aged up, we would get one of the versions together. So I remember so clearly reading before official Nintendo magazine changed to that. It was NOM. It was a Nintendo official magazine. I remember becoming obsessed and buying that and learning about games. So I very, very lucky to have been there since day one, and to sort of see this franchise grow. And I've been along the ride for every single generation, every single game, for better or worse. So it definitely makes me informed, and also it's very nice when I get to enjoy things like this year coming up to the 30th anniversary and stuff like that. It feels nice to have an informed idea of the history of the franchise and sort of the way that the opinion of it has changed over the years, because pre Pokemon Go there was a long time where people were like, oh, Pokemon's dead, no one cares about it, and now it's literally bigger than it's ever been. It's wonderful.
Thank you for sharing that. My next question was going to be, what is it about the series that captures your imagination and continues to engage you? But I think you've covered it all there. That was really nice. But you did also touch on something that I wanted to ask you. So before we move on to our main subject, what, in your opinion, are the highs and lows of the series?
It's hard to always judge these things because Pokemon is a children's franchise, and it always will be. It's always designed to sort of capture like I had that first sort of experience of a game that gave me a certain amount of agency over the experience. It's designed to capture the youngest generation and give them that again. So it's very difficult to be like, oh, when Pokemon X and Y came out when I was in my early 20s, I didn't have as much fun with it. It's like, well, yeah, you're 20 years old. So it's difficult to judge, and it's always a thing I try and remember. But I think the sort of the golden age, pun not intended, of Gold and Silver and Crystal, and having the first movie in the cinema, and then Pokemon 2000 coming to the cinema, that was such a phenomenal moment, especially because Pokemon very clearly then wasn't just this one hit thing. We had the next games, and they were better. They were, they looked better. There was more Pokemon. The games themselves, they work better. Everything, just that sort of excitement of knowing this is going to carry on, this is going to keep going, and obviously the potential then of we're going to get so many Pokemon, and not that I ever thought we'd get to 1,000, but just in that moment knowing oh, the sort of the well here is so deep, we can have so much, that was just a really wonderful time. And I think I very much loved the days of the DS games. I think that was a golden age in terms of the quality of the games. I don't know if it was in terms of notoriety, but I think from Platinum to Heart Gold and Soul Silver and Black and White 2 is easily the best run of quality the Pokemon games have ever had. And then, as I'm sure many people will agree, I think when they move from sprites to 3D, things get a little bit wonky. I'm not massively keen on X and Y. I don't think they're very... I love that Pokedex. I like that region. I like Kalos. But I think X and Y struggle with the same problem that I find with Sword and Shield, which is that the experience is a straight line from the starting point to the end of the game, and then there's not very much else to do. Whereas I think they sort of changed that a little bit in titles like Sun and Moon and stuff like that. And in recent years, I think we're sort of coming up to this sort of hopefully Pokemon quality renaissance, because as I alluded to earlier, Pokemon Go gave this series a shot in the arm that it really needed in cultural significance. You know, if you tried to, before Pokemon Go, speak to someone about Pokemon Sun and Moon or Ultra Moon and ask them who Lunala was and stuff like that, like, it wouldn't have happened. But Pokemon Go, maybe it's forgotten now. Hopefully it isn't. But that is a monumental cultural touchstone, not just in gaming, but in general. There has not been a zeitgeist in the gaming experience that touched everyone like that since probably Wii Sports, and before that maybe like the original Super Mario Brothers or arcades. Like, that is a incredible moment, and to have a franchise do that in its 20th year is so fun. So like after that, there was this huge renewed interest. Obviously, we've got Pokemon Let's Go, which are wonderfully looking games. I don't necessarily love them mechanically, but like the last couple of years, we've seen Pokemon Legends Arceus is the best 3D Pokemon game we've ever got, and then Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which I know had lots of problems on release, which is down to hardware and stuff like that. But I do think they're good games, and especially on Switch 2, I think they really shine. So like, yeah, that's a very long-winded way of saying, like, obviously Pokemon's gone up and down, but I think we're currently in an upswing, and I think also we are hopefully seeing the Pokemon Company reckon with the fact that their sort of ambitions reached beyond their means when it came to graphical quality and the actual hardware limitations of stuff like the Switch, which is always annoying when people were sat there zooming in on a picture of a tree online and going, Game Freak can't make games. Go look at the trailer for Beast of Reincarnation right now. That is their game they're making, which isn't on Switch, and it's this beautiful game by Game Freak. They're a phenomenal studio. They are making they're making a multifaceted RPG with hundreds of characters, with thousands of different models and moves every 2 years. Give them a break. Like, it's an insane thing for a studio to do. So, like, yeah, it's been the longest gap in mainline releases ever between Scarlet and Violet and Legends Z-A. It's coming up to 3 years, and there's never been a gap this long between games. So, I'm really hoping that, yeah, we're about to see like a huge quality spike that is reflected in not only this, but yeah, hopefully Gen 10 and whatever comes next.
Thank you for all of that, Nathan. I think that is a good point at which to take a break. And after that, we will be back with Nathan Ellingsworth to talk about the latest game in the Pokemon series, Pokémon Legends Z-A. Nathan, welcome back. So we have talked a bit about you and your history with Pokemon, but now we are going to shift to talking about the big story in the world of Pokemon, and that being the impending release of the latest game in the series, that is Pokemon Legends Z-A. Now, you know a lot about this game. You've done a lot of pre-release coverage for it. Now, if you were working for the Pokemon Company, what would your elevator pitch be for this game? And in your opinion, based on what you know about it and what you've covered of it, how close would you say that the Pokemon Company have got to achieving that aim?
Ooh, I would say what Pokemon Legends Arceus set out to do was create an experience that felt like players were actually out in the world catching Pokemon. It made catching Pokemon much quicker, and in Arceus you could just throw a Pokeball, and I think the aim for that was to make a Pokemon game which was a bit more in line with the anime and people's imaginations, and to make it all just a bit quicker and a bit more intuitive. Pokemon Legends Z-A is that for battling. They are making the battles both more engaging with the new real-time element, and also sort of more in line with people's sort of idea of the world of both the games and the anime. I think that's one of the main reasons why it's all set in a city, and you sort of wander around these very well populated areas, is I think Legends Z-A, the idea is you feel like a part of a living, breathing Pokemon world surrounded by people who also want to battle, and you get to do that as much as you want. I think that's the strength of it, and I think they're doing a pretty good job of communicating that.
Thinking of this game in the broader context of the Pokemon series, it feels to me like Nintendo have been pushing it particularly hard. There's been a lot of pre-release information, there's been a lot of media access to it, and a lot of coverage of the game. Now, first, do you think that is the case, or am I mistaken? Is this like sort of consistent across Pokemon games, or do you think there has been an increase in coverage of Z-A?
I think there's probably been a pretty standard amount of coverage, but I think the way they've gone about it is actually really smart. The last few weeks especially, we've seen a couple of announcement trailers for different Mega Pokemon for Legends Z-A. So we've had really good sort of marketing materials, but like trailers for Pokemon like Mega Malamar and Mega Hawlucha and other ones like that. So I think if you look at, like, by the numbers, the amount of sort of trailers released, it's probably about the same. But I think the internet has really latched on to the way that they've been revealing these Pokemon this time around, just because they've been having a lot of fun with it. They've been making these really great marketing materials, they've been making these really good videos which are like basically full CG trailers, and especially with, I think Mega Malamar was probably the most successful of these, where they just sort of created this in-universe joke of like Malamar taking over people's minds, and the community, as it does for Pokemon, just went and ran with it. They were having a great time. You know, people were creating posts saying like, "Oh, I've always been a Malamar fan. Here's all of this sort of merch I've got." Like, it was. I think it's a particularly successful marketing campaign. I don't know if it's much of a bigger one, but also I think that the longer wait between release has also meant that fans are a bit more rabid. I think they're a little bit more desperate for information.
Yeah. Oh, that might be it. I think the idea of them having more fun with it is a much better way of putting it. Yeah. So this wealth of like pre-release coverage that we've seen, it's made us aware of a few elements of the game that Nintendo really seem to want emphasized, and that, to me at least, seems to be the setting, the gameplay changes, and the like performance, like the visuals of the game. So to touch on that first, because I think that's, while that is important to a lot of people, and it's significant in terms of the recent history of the series, particularly with Scarlet and Violet, I think that's probably the least interesting element of the game. So if we tackle that first, would you say there's been any changes to the general art style or look? Do you think the game looks appreciably better than Legends Arceus or Scarlet and Violet from what you've seen, what you know about it?
I think in terms of like objective elements like models, the lighting, and the way it's running, it looks better. But for me personally, so far, I haven't seen the game in motion, like in my hands yet. But I probably still prefer the art style choices made for Legends Arceus. You know, I really like the painterly aesthetic. I really like the choice of colors for that game and the way that the sort of the open environments and the atmosphere looked, and even things like it had this amazing skybox, which I always really loved. I think there's a very distinct visual tone to Legends Arceus that was born out of limitations, and also the setting. You know, this sort of ancient Japan. They got to use this sort of like woodblock and painterly style which fit in. So yeah, Legends Z-A, it is meant to be more modern, and it feels more modern, and it objectively looks better, but I'm yet to be convinced I like the style as much.
Yeah, so that setting. So this is set in Lumiose City, which is the capital of the Kalos region, introduced in Generation 6, I believe, in Pokemon XY. What is your take on this game being a return to that setting? Like, is that something you wanted or expected?
I never really... I feel like because we had for a little while this regular cycle of main release game and then a remake, that fans got really in their heads about like, this is what game we should be getting. And then, lo and behold, when something like Legends Arceus was announced, which was a spanner in that sort of release schedule, people loved it. They were so happy. And then as soon as that sort of happened, people tried to put order back in and be like, okay, so that was a remake of, you know, Gen 4 in a way, so the next game will be sort of a remake of this. Just be surprised. I'm so happy that they did something that nobody was expecting. We were all expecting maybe Legends Johto, like a Legends like Celebi or Lugia or something like that, or maybe something to do with Black and White, because we expected the Black and White remix to be next. I'm so happy that it surprised people, and I'm sure like X and Y is definitely my least favorite generation. I really like the Pokédex. I really like the cities, but that is definitely my least favorite set of games. So I'm very intrigued to go back and sort of appreciate this area again, and I kind of as well, I'm just looking forward to seeing why they chose it, because at some point I think it's going to click, whether it's going to be like you know, they obviously wanted people to be doing lots of battles, and so then somewhere populated makes sense, so a city makes sense. So like I'm looking forward to just playing the game and feeling sort of like, oh, I get it, this is why this game had to happen here, because that will have been thought out at some point along the line. They didn't just spin a bottle or throw a dart at a wall. There's intent and there's meaning behind this. So yeah, I'm not thrilled. If I could have made a perfect Pokemon game in my head, it would have been anything but this. But also, that is such a good thing, because again, it's so nice to be surprised.
Yeah, I completely agree. Let these people make something that they think they have a good idea for. And my next question kind of touches on this. You may have already answered it. Do you think this the choice of setting means anything more broadly in terms of the series, or where would you like to see the next Legend game be set?
I think so. Thematically, I think they very clearly wanted to return to Mega Evolution, which is why I think going back to Kalos makes sense. Lumiose City is integral to those games and that story. And then I think, from what I can tell from like, you know, the brief glimpse at the game, Legends Z-A is probably going to touch on some elements of the X and Y story, so things like the Ultimate Weapon or the Pokemon, maybe the Pokemon War from thousands of years ago, stuff like that, and the role of Floette in the story. So like yeah, I think thematically it's all going to make perfect sense as to why, like, okay, yeah, Pokemon, like Mega Evolution, it all had to be here. But like, if I could do anything, what I would love to do, I'm a Gold, Silver, Crystal diehard. I think Heart Gold and Soul Silver, as well as Pokemon Crystal, are the absolute like zenith of Pokemon. I don't think it's ever been beaten. And Lugia is my favorite legendary. So what I would love to do is I would love to do in Pokemon Gold and Silver, you have the Legend of the Burning Tower, which also has the legendary beasts, so Suicune, Raikou, and Entei. I would love to do a Legends game that explores the before of the Burning Tower and sort of the mythology of Johto. Like, but also this is like proper surface level stuff. So like that's very basic, but I would like to see that world explored. Other than that, I think I'd love to. Because Arceus did a specific Pokemon, I would love to do like a specific game exploring another one that I really like. Oh my god, I'm gonna struggle with the name now. Genesect is a mythical Pokemon. It's one of the ones that like it's this ancient Pokemon that was brought into the future, and it can have different drives, but it to be take on different types. But also it's that to me is another Pokemon that I'm like, oh, this is prime for a really good story of like you could go in the past of what Genesect was beforehand, and then you could have these like future segments, or you know, like in Arceus where a person's thrown back in time. Like that's a Pokemon who their mythology is so much more fascinating to me than anything that's quite been done with him yet. You know what I mean? But like, yeah, it's one of the ones where I'm like, oh, there's so much scope there for something really interesting. Which like, yeah, a lot of Pokemon have, but that's one that I've always really liked, and I thought like, cool, that would be a good entry point for an interesting sort of exploration of the Pokemon story back through like different time periods and places.
That's such an interesting answer. They should consult with you on future games ideas. So lastly on those the headline features that I outlined earlier, the gameplay is probably the most significant change and what seems to be the selling point of Z-A. The game introduces like a modified battle system that integrates like traditional turn-based model with some real-time elements. Now, for an uninformed observer like myself, are you able to elaborate on how the system works, how it differs from previous games?
Yeah, I would say the nearest thing I can probably it's now sort of reminiscent of like Final Fantasy like 7, where you have like a moves that are on a cooldown timer and you're waiting for that move to become available again, but also while moving around in 3D space. So basically it's an active battle system now, but melded with the 3D movement of Legends Arceus. So you can still dodge, you can still move around the arena, and importantly, the trainer themselves can still take damage, which obviously won't necessarily happen in trainer battles. But I think it's taken the baton of that more involved sort of idea of the Pokemon world from Arceus, and just exploring that further, and in a way that I'm really interested to see how it plays out, because I've heard nothing but good things. I've heard everyone be like, maybe this isn't what we want for the mainline games, but in terms of a different Pokemon game exploring a new way to do the battles, like, this is wonderful. The idea of actually instead of just sat there going growl, flamethrower, growl, and pressing A button every now and again, feeling that engaged, I think, is the right word, where like you're looking at the position of the trainer, you're planning your position. I think Xenoblade is another great example. Like, I love the Xenoblade games, and that is an RPG with 3D movement and a cooldown system. So I think it might even be like a little bit Xenobladey, which is music to my ears, because those games are basically perfect.
This game is a series sequel to Legends Arceus, which was a critically well-received game, particularly in terms of the tweaks it made to the established formula. Now, have you seen anything, any continuity in terms of gameplay between that game and this one? Like, is there anything that Arceus succeeded at that you see as having carried over?
I think we've had it confirmed that you can still just lob a Pokeball at a wild Pokemon and hope for the best, which is the best gameplay improvement that Legends Arceus made, and it was one of the ones that I was really gutted we couldn't do in Scarlet and Violet, which makes sense. They're different games, that's why there's a clear delineation between the Legends games and this sort of thing, but I absolutely loved that. So yeah, really happy that you can just look at a Pokemon and go oof and catch it, because God, that feels good. And what else? I think basically that's it, because there's so much different in this take on it. I think that obviously it's more sort of open zone, and we're going to have the wild areas in Legends Z-A instead of these huge sort of outside environments of Legends Arceus. So it's not quite the same, but I don't know. I think we'll see a lot more when we get into it, and we'll probably see some overlaps. But I think they've clearly taken the elements that they thought worked, and then looked at the other ones that they thought they wanted to improve or change, and are just running with it. Like, God, if they make another one of these, which I'm sure they will, be very interesting to see what elements they take forward again, and what remnants they can even look at and go like, okay, what else can we change and make better?
Yes, it's an exciting time for Pokemon as a series, for a series that people, like you said earlier, for years were saying is stale, it's really plateaued. Now, with this sort of sub-series, we have this expectation and want for them to innovate, which is great. I mean, that's just good for everyone. So lastly, on the gameplay, in my, like air quotes, research for this episode, which has effectively been me listening to loads of Pokemon podcasts and trying to work out what people are talking about, I noticed one consistent talking point, and that was Mega Evolutions. People seem to be like fans of these, and they're very excited to get new ones. Could you explain to me what is a Mega Evolution? And are you a fan? And do you want to see more of these in Legends Z-A?
Absolutely. So Mega Evolution was introduced in Pokemon X and Y, which is a very long time ago now. And it is basically the first time Pokemon added what I would call a gimmick. Before then, there was like a couple of things like fusions or Pokemon with different forms, but I think it's one of the first times they introduced an element which fundamentally changed the battles or the game in some way, that would be associated with a certain generation. So Pokemon can evolve usually once, sometimes twice. But once they have those 3 sort of branches, that's as far as they go. Whereas in Digimon, the Digimon can sort of take on this further form and another one and then turn into something else, and eventually they go back to a previous form. So Mega Evolution actually takes a bit of a cue from that. So Pokemon that are fully evolved, like Charizard or Gengar or a couple of other ones, I say a couple, there's loads of them, they could take on this more powerful form, which sort of looks like another evolution, but isn't, and in battle, and then eventually after the battle they go back to their previous form. So it's a temporary increase in power. And to balance this, you could only have 1 Mega Evolution per battle, per team. So you could have more than 1 Pokemon that could Mega Evolve in your party, but when you were doing a head-to-head, you could literally only Mega Evolve one Pokemon. And also they had to be holding an item to Mega Evolve, so it was another sort of thing. So it was a very interesting way to add some a sort of surprise to battles, and also a way to use nostalgia and some older Pokemon which they previously were like, well, everyone wants to buy a Charmander or a Charizard plush, but we can't just release Charizard again. What do we do? So it's the first time they experimented with anything in terms of like going back and adding new forms, which then they would expand with like regional forms and convergent evolution and stuff like that. So I love the mechanic personally. I think it's absolutely the best thing about X and Y, and I also love that it makes the Pokemon world feel malleable in a way that it always has been. You know, like even in the very first generation there was Eevee, which could turn into 3 different Pokemon, which is now 6 or I can't remember exactly how many, I can't count, but like Pokemon's always been like, look, these things can do anything. They can, there's so many different facets to this world, and ever since Mega Evolution, the team at Game Freak and everyone else have just been like just doing different things and adding different sort of elements that just expand on the lore and the depth of the Pokemon world, and I love that. So to me, I absolutely love Mega Evolution. I'm really happy it's back, and I'm really excited to see hopefully it carry over into future games. We know it's going to be in Pokemon Champions, but I'd love to see it in the next generation.
I think you have just undone 20 years of confusion for me there. I feel like a mist has been lifted. I understand what people are talking about now. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
So with all that in mind, there seems to be a lot of positive elements working in favour of Legends Z-A. There seems to be justifiable expectations that Legends Z-A is, at the very least, it's going to be a very good Pokemon game with the potential to, be a new high point in the series canon. Now, from your perspective on the game and your perspective as an educated fan, do you think that's the case? Now, Pokemon games, they will always succeed commercially, and this is likely to be no different. But do you think that this game can pull in gamers from outside of the traditional fan base? Do you think it can pull in fans from outside of that fan base to a greater extent than previous games?
I think that's difficult to answer because it will all depend on how well it executes what it sets out to do. So Pokemon Legends Arceus, I think probably did pull in some new fans for the series. I don't know how many of those translated to Scarlet and Violet, but Scarlet and Violet sold like double what Legends Arceus did, which I think did about 11, 12 million. It definitely reached over 10. So like these aren't small selling games by any means. But I think the entry point for that was like, okay, now you are exploring the Pokemon world. Now you are just walking around and you're discovering, like, we've made this open environment and, we've made catching easier and more fun. So like, in terms of what they were setting out to do and what the game was advertised as, I think Legends Arceus nailed that. I think it created an experience that really did make it feel like you were exploring a world and having a wonderful time catching Pokemon. Now, with the Legends Z-A, they're very clearly trying to make a similar sort of adjustment to battles, and that, I think, is a harder sell. And I'm not sure how much that's going to bring in new people. And also, we're yet to see the critical consensus of how well they've executed on that. We know that one of the main driving forces of the game is the ZA Royale, which is this sort of late night battling network where you go up the ranks from Z to A, and you spend loads of time battling. So like the game's going to be a lot of battles. It really sounds like that's going to have to be a large meat of it. So, who knows if 20, 30 hours into the game, battling is just as fun as it was at the beginning. But I know for me, if I load up Arceus now and I explore that world and I catch Pokemon, it is just as fun as the second I started playing that game. And yeah, that to me is going to be the proof of the pudding in terms of how well that this attempt at a Pokemon game translates to the general public and how it's received. I hope it does well, especially because with the graphical improvements and the performance improvements on Switch 2, this is the first Pokemon game in a while that's not going to feel like it was held back. Like it's going to be really nice to play a Pokemon game at 60 frames again. So yeah, who knows? I hope that answers that well enough. It's a very difficult sort of thing to dissect and explain, but yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I don't know if it's just as at a glance as appealing as Arceus, but I hope the finished product is.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what the sort of wider reaction to it is. I think there is a really good chance that it will pull in a wider audience. I think they seem to be reaching out beyond the traditional fan base, and I hope that people do pick it up on that basis. I hope they get rewarded for their attempts to innovate. I think that is that's worthy of people's attention. So that brings us onto the last area that I want to touch on today. I'd like to bring all of this together and really make use of your specialist knowledge. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I am a lapsed Pokemon fan. I loved Reddit release, haven't touched a Pokemon game since. Now, based on the marketing and the general received wisdom that it is a more mechanically complex and satisfying game, and given what you've said about it, I am very interested in Z-A. But I'm a little bit hesitant, given the price and my inexperience with the series. So at the time of recording, I've got a few days left to decide. I wanted to ask you, can you recommend 3 Pokemon games that I should play before Legends Z-A releases that could offer me like a re-entry point to the series? Like 3 games that represent either like high points in your opinion or like interesting diversions that could get me back on board.
Absolutely. So I think if you're a newcomer, or at least a lapsed fan who wants to come back, I would say that Legends Arceus is the best entry point to the franchise in quite some time.
Okay.
I think other than that, the best, as I've said, I think the best games are Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I think Black and White 2 are mechanically better games, but Heart Gold and Soul Silver sort of have this amazing mixture of nostalgia and just like really solid vibes. They did a lot of work with the seasons, and like they put a lot of like semi sort of like particle effects of like leaves moving around. Just the love and attention paid to Heart Gold and Soul Silver is still so obvious, and they're just phenomenal to this day, and they're very, very content rich. And as well, I think another one I would say, and other people might not agree with me, but in terms of like if you wanted to get interested or like sort of excited by the Pokemon world again and exploring a Pokemon world, New Pokemon Snap is really good. I think it's a wonderful game. I think it's a really good sort of legacy sequel, and it's the best graphically Pokemon has literally ever looked. Like obviously just by virtue of being the nearest one, but like the Bandai Namco team did a phenomenal job, and there's a couple of like little like what's the word I want, like biomes and areas to explore, and just like it is like proper wish fulfillment stuff. Getting to explore these areas, whether it's like going underground or like swimming or like going underwater or going through jungles, and like just seeing this living, breathing world like actually populated by Pokemon and them running around and doing their sort of thing, like it's just so wonderful. It really does have this touch of magic to it, and I really, really love it. But I also love photography games, and I was obsessed with Snap. So like, I think that would be a really good way of getting yourself, excited by the possibilities of like what a Pokemon world would be.
Cool, thank you. That's a good little homework list for me. And I have been interested in Pokemon Snap. I just haven't pulled the trigger on it. Yeah, cool. Thank you for those recommendations. That's very insightful. Nathan, I have no more questions for you. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing that story of your career and your insights into Pokemon as a series and the new game. So at this point, I'd like to throw to you for you to plug anything that you want to plug on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you are a Pokemon fan, or if you know someone who's a Pokemon fan and would like to keep up to date with stuff like events and codes, definitely sign up for my newsletter. It's called the Goldenrod Gazette, and if you find me online, I share it all the time. You can find me on X as what am I on there? Nate and Destroy. I'm on Blue Sky as Nathan Ellingsworth and stuff like that. And also, I'm obviously part of the Secret Rare podcast with the wonderful Jordan Midler and Tom Ryan Smith. Please go and give us a watch there. Like, we love chatting about Pokemon. And other than that, just keep an eye out for my work. I will be doing coverage of Pokemon Legends Z-A for several different websites. So I'll be popping up and around. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
As you have bylines in so many places, is the best place to follow your writing like Blue Sky, X?
Yeah, I normally share my stuff on X or Blue Sky. So yeah, you can find me. There's not many Nathan Ellingsworth, so if you search me, you will find me.
Cool. Great. All of those links will be in the show notes. Nathan, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
My thanks to Nathan for his time and for sharing those stories about his career and his expertise on Pokemon. He's done a lot, and he's doing a lot, and I encourage you to follow his work online. Now, you've just heard where you can find him, but if you need a reminder, I'll elaborate more on that in a minute. Because, if you want to know, my conversation with Nathan was indeed super effective. I've pre-ordered Pokémon Legends Z-A and will be finally returning to a world that left me behind so very long ago. I'm looking forward to it. Maybe I'll find my Dragonite again. And, just so you know, I listen to my granddad now. Thanks for listening. In the episode description, there are links to all the places that you can find Nathan online. And, as usual, you'll also find a link to the Dialogue Tree newsletter, which includes detailed show notes for the episode, including some video, music, and more words about the interview. The artwork for Dialogue Tree was designed by Pixel Benny, and you can find the show online at dialoguetree.cc. Talk to you next time.